Ryan.
Today we are learning basketball with Tyler Wilson. Covers the Spurs, the NBA, the draft with Swish Theory, host of the Finishing Touch Pod, writer of the Prospecting Leads Substack. You can subscribe and you can follow him at Prospecting NBA. But how are you doing today, Tyler? Excited to dive into some monumental shifts for the Spurs.
Man, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. San Antonio basketball is back. I am very excited about the last couple games, and it's fun going forward. Definitely feels a lot different than it did a couple of years ago. It's crazy how much can change in a couple of years, but it's awesome.
Hey man, it's kind of like the Chiefs with Mahomes. Like you hit on this star draft pick, and the sky's the limit of what you can build in the near future. And you got Wembanyama on a rookie contract right now. Feels like you have basically star level impact on the most affordable contract in the game, and that just opens up the leeway for adding defense here and there, adding some scores here and there, and on top of bringing in Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, some veterans right away, that some win now moves, the Spurs go right on in and bring in a guard of the future, of the now, with De'Aaron Fox, just a star of this game. That playoff series with the Warriors lives rent free in my head. That back and forth, like he's just super exciting player in his own right, and seems like a perfect match with the Spurs. So what was it like when he said he wants a trade and he wants to play with the Spurs, and he's represented by Clutch, who tends to help players get the things they want? So what was that like, just being rumored as like, oh, not only does he want to trade, he wants to play here. So what's it like just being a destination city now with
That was
Wemby in
wild.
full?
That was wild. The only player of his stature, I would say, that has like outwardly chosen San Antonio to be like their place where they want to be is like probably LaMarcus Aldridge back in like the early 20 teens, and that was incredible too when that happened. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's real. And I guess you got to go a decade in between people wanting to wind up in San Antonio, and you got to have some factors that are working in your favor, be it your the player's wife being from San Antonio, or being from Texas. That helps. I mean, LaMarcus was from like the Texas area too. It was from, I think, the Dallas area, but it was awesome. It was kind of a shock to see it come out that way, just because it never happens that way for San Antonio, especially it being like a smaller market. Even as it is a really big city, but I would say as a medium market, it's definitely on the smaller side for NBA franchises. So it was very cool to see a player prioritize being here, and I think he's an awesome fit. I think that there was a lot of consternation of like what the package would be and what it would end up. And I think when you actually see the deal as it was kind of a no brainer. And there's layers to the goodness of it. He's by no means the last piece. They may not even make the play in this year, and I think that's okay. But he's, for somebody who was a huge DeJounte Murray fan when he was in San Antonio, and I still love DeJounte despite the horrid things he said about my franchise as he went out the door. De'Aaron Fox kind of reminds me of like a supercharged version of DeJounte, like with like true blue, like genuine, like elite athleticism, and a little bit cleaner to pull up and a little bit easier to get into. I think he's an awesome fit, and it's hard to find a better point guard to start building with than De'Aaron, at least.
Yeah, and like we were talking on a little bit before the pod as well, it just seems like a natural fit with Wembanyama. Like you have this giant shooting gravity, over 7-footer, able to launch threes, and he's launching like 9 a game, or or however many it feels like per game. There, he's at
Yeah,
8.8 on 35%.
it's wild.
So just to have, sorry, go ahead.
So I said the comparison to Mahomes, I think, is a really actually interesting one, and that like he makes things happen that don't make sense and kind of like break your brain a bit, and the types of players that he is going to best utilize are maybe not the types of players that other teams are going to best utilize all the time. And I think that you look at like the Tyreek Hill fit, and I'm a lifelong Broncos fan, so like it's really nice to be on the other end of a generational prospect joining the general division. It's been a rough couple of years, but the fit with De'Aaron Fox is really great, and I think that you need that speed element. And I was listening to the Spurs Insider Pod earlier this week, and they were talking about like just asking around different media guys at the Spurs games of like, is his first step as fast as Tony's? Is it faster than Tony Parker? Like, what is like how quickly does he get places on the court, and how does it compare? And I think that the general consensus was it's kind of hard to tell, and the fact that you're asking the question, I think, is really meaningful. And San Antonio really hasn't had a true point guard since Tony Parker left. And Dejounte again was great, and I love Dejounte, but I think that I think reasonable minds will agree that maybe he's not like a top 10 point guard, or never was a top 10 point guard. And the idea that De'Aaron could do that on for a trade package that was generally scraps and less than important picks is pretty awesome. And I think it really positions him well to make some aggressive moves in the coming months. So we'll see how it all turns out.
A comparison to Tony Parker's first step is some high praise
Dude,
among
it was
Spurs fans.
I was kind of shocked to hear it, and I was like, man, like, well, he gets the court like on plays, he gets there so quickly and kind of just like disappears in gaps of the defense, which is the same thing kind of like Tony did, where it was having a really good spatial awareness of where the hole is going to be and like just like appearing there essentially, like that he has a real good feel for that. And obviously in San Antonio now the court is a little more spaced, and it's a really interesting dynamic, and there will certainly be some kinks to work out, but it's super exciting. And just like the idea of him just getting to his left hand, and like at the end of the Atlanta game, of like, all right, we're just gonna get him to his left hand, and Wemby are gonna slip the screen, and we're just gonna see what happens. And it like to make more comparisons, it reminded me of like the Marc Gasol and Mike Conley pick and roll, where it's like, well, if you really can like flesh this out and really understand each other and what you're gonna do, that kind of action at the end of a basketball game is borderline unstoppable when you have two genuine scorers who can like threaten you from all over the court. So uh, it is an awesome pairing. I'm very excited about it.
Hey, I mean, you pair someone with that speed in a pick and roll, pick and pop with the length, the height, the shooting gravity of Wembanyama. It does feel like one of those just unguardable pairs that, when you have two guys as skilled at what they do, like a true downhill force and a true pick and pop threat like that, who can go up for the alley oop on the roll too, and who can beat a mismatch in a whole bunch of different ways. Like just a simple pick and roll becomes like one of the deadliest options around. So to hit on that trade real quick, the Spurs get De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings get Zach LaVine, City Sissoko, sorry.
Yeah.
Three first round picks, 3 second-round picks, and the Bulls get Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Herter, and their own 2025 first round pick back from the Spurs. So, like you said, I mean, they get him for like Zach Collins was the salary matching who was like 10th or 11th in playing time on the roster. So they get off a bad deal, and it only costs like 3 or 4 first rounders and second rounders. A lot of them are like protected picks. They're late picks. They're
Hmm.
not your average or not your like cream of the crop first round pick. So like the idea that you get a star level player on a max deal for like you described, just straps, like not much going around. That's insane. First of all, so you have the financial room because of Wembanyama's contract to go after some proven stars on big deals like that. You still have Chris Paul and Barnes in play, who have been really good veterans for this team, and you're able to do all that, load up for the future, and you still might add another top pick this year, which is crazy to think about. Like it's in a prime team building position, and it helps when you have potentially one of the greatest players ever, like a guy that before he was drafted you could reasonably say, yeah, he might be a top 20 all-time great player when he's all said and done. Like that's the expectations and he's living up to it. Like that's just an insane advantage to build a team around, to just kind of know you have this unicorn in place that's, pending all the worst things that could happen, he's there. He's not going anywhere. Like you got at least 4 to 7 years of this guy, and ideally a whole 10 or 15, like the next Duncan or Robinson are coming around. So just an insane time to be a Spurs fan, and they're what's interesting is Wemby might as well. Wemby might not lose another Defensive Player of the Year for like 10 years. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
the Spurs are 21st in point differential, 16th in offense, and 21st in defense. And normally you would think a top 5 defense gets rewarded for Defensive Player of the Year. So maybe someone like uh, Jaren Jackson, maybe he sneaks back into the conversation with the Memphis up to like 6th. But Wemby's just been so incredible individually, and everyone just loves watching him, loves rooting for him, that he is jolted to the top. Like his block numbers are insane off the bat. Like he's first overall in blocks per game at 3.9. He's got 174 total blocks on the season, Wembanyama, and no other player even has 100 total blocks. Like that,
That's
that's
crazy.
just an insane stat
That's
right off the bat. And you don't have to use any minutes or game filters like to get all the small sample players out of there. Wembanyama is just leading all of them, and it's just insane block numbers off the bat. So that alone probably wins him the award. And then you look at his deflections; he's tied for 14th with 3.2 deflections per game, and he's actually tied with De'Aaron Fox and OG Anunoby in that stat. So you have two anchors of your defense top 15 in deflections per game. You have this downhill force with the quick first step explosiveness in De'Aaron Fox, who's shown kind of a privy to his pull up jumper over the last few years. So I'm really interested to see how that dynamic looks like. How much Wembenyama opens the paint, opens the space for D Fox to get back to what he does best in my mind, which is get to the rim, and how the push and pull of that dynamic, that pick and roll, how defenses respond. Do they try to load up on Fox and leave Wemby open, or vice versa? And it's just tough to stop there. So, what have you seen in their first few games together that gives you hope of what that chemistry, that dynamic could be?
I think that the spacing that Wemby provides at the five is something that is like a unique advantage that's going to be provided to the team for the next like decade. And how you maximize that is going to be in like essentially the most interesting question of the Spurs offense is that there is this idea that you could what we're kind of doing right now is the idea of like spacing them out with like five spacers on the floor, just open it up as much as you can and make things happen. And I think that the way the roster is built now, you can kind of understand why they're maybe not like a top half defense, even with Wemby and like starting Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul and now De'Aaron Fox too, which is a good defender, but playing him with Chris Paul offers a lot of places for defenses to attack, which I think you've seen at the end of games to start, which is fine. Like I don't think that Chris Paul came here to play on the bench. I don't think that the San Antonio front office came here to replace him in the starting lineup at any point. That's is probably an agreement that was made between them before he signed, and that is fine. We'll maybe lose some games because of that, but I think that the benefits of it and the benefits of having Chris Paul in house this season have been enormous. In terms of Fox's ability to attack the paint and get them, I think that there has been a more of a proclivity to settle for pull-ups in Sacramento. I think that their situation is a little bit different. I think it's a little bit easier for him to get all the way to the rim now, and the way he's played to start his time in San Antonio, it doesn't feel like he's settling for jumpers a lot. It feels like he's kind of taking them as they come in the flow of the offense. And again, they're not really like it's not running a whole lot of offense. It's a lot of like really simple actions and kind of clearing out space and letting people kind of cook on their own. And it's been fun to watch. And I look forward to having a full off season and seeing what that looks like, and then kind of how they build the roster around him. Because I think, like as you said before, that the outgoing salaries were like Zach Collins, who had been that was like 10th or 11th, and had been kind of pushed out of the rotation entirely over the last couple of months, and Trey Jones, who like he is essentially trading De'Aaron Fox for Trey Jones in your lineup, which is great. That's really nice. But you never really had to play Trey Jones and Chris Paul together, which now it's a little bit different. But the talent ad is enormous, and the pick capital that was spent. He said like 3 first-round picks. Like the first one is a Charlotte pick that's lotto protected. That's going to turn in 2 seconds. So really, it's like 5 seconds and 2 picks. One of them being the Spurs 2027 pick, which hopefully should be in the 20s, and then that Minnesota 2031 unprotected, which I think is like the true blue chip asset that was given up in the trade, because I do think that like has a chance to be a good pick, but again, it is 6 years down the line, and the cashing in on that as early as they were able to, I think, was really nice, and especially considering they got that in the trade for Dillingham at the draft, which wasn't super pleasing for a ton of Spurs fans, which I can understand. There was a need for a real shot creating guard, and it turns out we can just get one in their prime instead. That works out well. I think it's a pretty good trade, and I think that even beyond that, I think that the going into next year, they're not going to have a ton of cap space, and I actually kind of like that. Using Collins is like I think it's like 14 or 15 million that was going to be on the books for next year was the only salary for next year that they traded. And as we were kind of entering the negotiations, there's a lot of talk of like, is this going to be a Vassell package that's centered around it? Is it going to be like Keldon and Collins and some picks? Like, how is it going to actually end up working out? I think the fact that you didn't deal any long-term salary besides Collins is helpful, in that there's not really any leverage for Fox's camp and Clutch to want to renegotiate and extend next year. Like, you'd have to move off a significant amount of money to do that. That's not like something that would easily happen. And having that kind of removed as a possibility, I think is great. I think the renegotiation and extend is like, I'm sure it buys goodwill with your players and your team, but I think that's just one of the most the lowest return for your dollar spent that you can find in the front office in terms of like contract negotiations, because you're tearing up a good deal and replacing it with a market value deal a year early, which is not ideal. So I was really pleased to kind of see that is maybe not going to be part of the equation, which I think that if they had used Keldon and his 20 million and Collins and created that space, I think it would have been hard to say no if you weren't going to bring in somebody of real value with that space. Which again, like we said, it takes about once every decade, it seems like, to get somebody of real value to come to San Antonio in free agency or the trade market. So that was the draft pick compensation and the player compensation going on. I think was really great. I think they're really well positioned to make aggressive moves to try to build this roster going into the next year or two. Which there is going to be a lot of there will be a lot of turnover for sure. I'm certain, but definitely in a good place, and I look forward to it. I think this upcoming draft will be a really interesting inflection point to see which kind of direction they decide to go. It does feel like they've not that they've there are similarities to the OKC rebuild, and that you've had this like surplus of assets and draft capital, and like OKC got it kind of all in like one batch and kind of continued to build it with cap space, which San Antonio did over the last couple of years in terms of taking back bad deals and kind of being a facilitator for stuff, which is how they get that King swap and Harrison Barnes. That I think that it's great to have a ton of assets. It's not great when you're like New Orleans and you get them and like they're burning a hole in your pocket and you're like, I want to make these deals now and I want to like go and like try to build around our stars. And then you kind of like after a couple of years are left with not a whole lot of like mediocre options and kind of like nowhere to turn. I think that like keeping as like trying to maximize or keeping that idea of like asset maximization, like you are a team that doesn't have anything, and making moves around that while you still do have a surplus of assets was kind of like the requirement for adding a star. And having done that here to like a degree that I thought was much greater than I expected, was absolutely has to be the biggest one. Because again, it's like trading the number 8 pick in Trey Jones for De'Aaron Fox. Like, I'll take
No,
that.
no
I'll do
brainer.
it. So yeah, it's a great spot to be in, and I think they've done a really good job, a really shrewd job of managing their assets so far. So we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, especially for a place like San Antonio, you said like managing that flexibility is important, and it doesn't always have to come in the way of just creating a lot of cap space hoping to sign someone. Like you can do it this way. You can trade for that max salary and acquire that star in their prime. And it's a good idea to bring in guys before they hit free agency, in my opinion, anyway, because you kind of get to test the waters on both sides, like see how the working relationship
Mhm.
is, see maybe how the player likes the city and the organization, and then vice versa. And if that kind of works for a year or two and both sides are happy, it becomes a lot more amicable to just pay each other and be all in on another max after that. So I think it's a great way to bring in talent that wanted to be here. The ages are all, in my opinion, a clean window. Like it doesn't have to be a perfect, everyone's the same age. Like you mentioned, Fox is entering his prime at 27 years old. Wembenyama is only 21 doing all this, which is insane. Vassell is 24. Castle's 20. So you have a guy entering his athletic prime in theory for another 5 years or so at least, and that can extend even longer if he rounds out the skill of his game. So I think they're building a really smart way, obviously, to bring in talent on that star salary while they can right now. And like you mentioned, you have a couple prospects left. You still have picks left where you can move salary or move some of these guys for another one down the line. So especially now that Clutch is involved, you kind of are able to work with that organization maybe with through Fox, see if there's anyone else that maybe a third or fourth star want to team up as well down the line. And you mentioned the draft that we'll dive into in a little bit here with they're still not necessarily competing for the playoffs this year. They might add. These are two really strong drafts to be a part of, and especially next year, I think especially. But there's a lot of talent in this year as well. So depending where that pick falls, you had another impressive prospect while you're on your way up with Wemby. So a lot of stuff to be excited about. The Spurs just had a close one with my Magic the other day where, Devin
Yeah.
Vassell drops 25. Vassell is a Magic killer. The Magic pulled out a late close game. Paulo hit a game winner. We got to give him a shout. And Magic basketball looking nice again. Looking back for a second, where they've had a couple rough bumps along the way recently, but they had a little comeback. They had Franz going off, putting up all-star numbers like 30 something points, and Paulo hit the game winner, just an ISO clear out up to go up one with about 20 or 30 seconds left. And, always nice to see that. But man, Vassell is joining this list of like random Magic killers. Like he scores 16 a game on 62% true shooting against the Magic, which is his second highest points per game and third highest efficiency of any team. So I know he went to Florida State. He's a Florida guy, so maybe that's it. But I don't know what it is. Why Devin
Yeah.
Vassell just has it out for the Magic anytime he stops by. He's like, I'm gonna drop 20 on y'all, just for good measure. So what do you make of that game?
Yeah, he was really good. I think that his fit with Fox is a really interesting one, and his fit with, I guess, like Fox and Castle in particular, I think, is something I'm looking forward to seeing grow over the next couple of months here. I Vassell is a really interesting case, and I think that like going into the trade negotiation, my first inclination was like, oh, Vassell's going to have to be a part of the deal. Like Sacramento's going to want to win now. They want somebody that's going to be able to like actually help them compete. But like he's looked really bad this year. I think he's been overtaxed, and that putting him in a situation where he's going to be playing a more appropriate role and able to kind of maximize his skill set more, it will go a long way in terms of like his team success, but also like increasing his value in the future. Like you said, we've retained a lot of the core pieces that can be used in deals in the future, and I think that you just have to actually have them be like towards the peak of their value and not at like the absolute like doldrums of it. And I think that Fox goes a long way in doing that. I think that his fit with Vassell is great. Vassell coming into college was an incredible transition player, and I think that his skill set really fits well with that, because like Fox, every time he touches the ball, is trying to sprint down the court. And I think Castle is very similar in the same way, in that like he is very happy filling the lane and yamming on people in transition, and that putting them into a situation where they have somebody else that can stir the drink a little bit and kind of grease the wheels on offense to make their jobs a little bit easier will go a long way in terms of like, them finding their confidence and playing better. And I think both of them have played really well since Fox has been here. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that has everything to do with the fact that that skill set of advantage creation was like desperately needed.
Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from beyond the arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.
And I think that with Vassell, the benefit is kind of obvious in that he's a spacer. He was billed as a 3-and-D guy who was probably overtaxed on offense, and his creation burden, his passing's gotten a lot better. And his shot off the dribble is really good. And he's gotten to the rim more, but putting him into more of like a third fiddle kind of role and allowing him to revert back to taking more shots off the catch and like off of movement is a great thing, and kind of like an easy one to project in your mind. The fit with Castle is one that I think is a little more interesting. I think that from like an outside view, it's pretty easy to go, oh, Castle doesn't shoot. Fox is already a good defender. Like how much value is Castle bringing in terms of like next to Fox? And I think that more than anything, putting Castle into a situation where he can work as kind of like this like glue guy or role filler is really nice. And I don't think he's afraid to take shots. Obviously, he's shooting like 30% from three this year and like 30% on jumpers. It's not great. Those are tough numbers, but he's a rookie, and the fact that he's actually taking them and is taking them more frequently as he's kind of come around here is important. And kind of like he was our team's leader in drives per game this year, before Fox got here, and I think Fox drives about twice as often as he does. And so I think that he was overtaxed in his role, and that like he was the only real rim pressure presence we had on the roster besides like Trey Jones. And that is tough. I think that he is good there. I think he's really strong and is an interesting fit in terms of like a on-ball creator as he gets older, but it's not there right now. He doesn't really have the finishing in traffic. He doesn't really have the jumper off the dribble that is consistent enough. And again, putting him into a role where he can play off of somebody and take advantage of advantages created by somebody else besides Wembanyama is awesome. And that like you can't really guard a Fox Wembanyama pick and roll with two people. Like it's going to be really difficult over time, and allowing him to like attack the gaps in a defense and get to the rim with more room to work instead of like trying to drive into like a packed paint or on two defenders is has been really fun to see. And I when watching Castle this year, I would say like Crow has never tasted this good. Like I think he's really good, and I was not super enthused about the pick last year. I still like Ron Holland more. I think Ron Holland's probably the best prospect in that class. But I think Castle is a really special team guy and somebody who just like makes lineups better as he's on there. And the less you have to ask him to do, the more he's going to do, I guess is what I would say. And the less you're putting on his plate, the more you're allowing him to clean up for everybody else. And I'm really excited about that. And and then beyond that, even like the three kind of like cores of Spurs basketball right now outside of Wemby have been Vassell, Castle, and Sohan. I love Sohan. He's my favorite player on the team. I went to Baylor, so I'm incredibly biased in that respect. But he is awesome, and he's been playing a lot of small ball five since the Bassey injury in the Collins trade, which isn't like his ideal role. But I think his synergy with Fox as a role man has been really good. His kind of like dirty work aspect of it and has been fantastic. And the team rebounds a lot better when he's on the court. I agree with playing Harrison Barnes in the starting lineup because like you need some spacing in there, especially now. But with the hope of continued development of the shot of Sohan and Castle, I think that a world where they can share a court together and it not be terrible would be really interesting because I think that they kind of would account for doing everything you need to have done off the ball and on defense around Wembanyama, just within the two of them. So I really love that we're able to keep all those guys, and I am pretty high on their overall potential. And it'll be interesting to see who the front office values most in trade talks going forward, and like what the ultimate vision is for building the roster. Because there is this whole idea of like we should space the floor and have all these spacers everywhere, which they're doing to an extent, but they haven't invested in spacing in that way in a long time. Like since like I don't know, like since we couldn't get Pop to stop playing Marco Bellinelli back in like 2017. So I think that it'll be interesting to see what route they choose to go down. And I am one that prefers so like let's just have like the greatest defense of all time and see what we can patch together. Because you have like the greatest shooting five of all time. Like I respect the Cat. Like Cat is awesome. Wemby is a much better shooter at age 20, 21 than Cat was, and that is. Well, maybe not much better, but I think that the projection is stronger. I think he's more bold and he's been more empowered to do so, and he's like 4 inches taller, which is insane. That Cat wasn't taking like floater threes from the elbow. Like that's wild. So I think that the advantages that brings is going to allow for some really interesting roster construction and really maximize players like a Sohan or a Castle where you wouldn't be able to in other spots. And is that like the ultimate starting five of like Fox, Castle, Vassell, Sohan, and Wemby? Like probably not. I don't think that's enough shooting. Maybe in the long term if you see some incredible growth, but I think as like a general core of guys that you're gonna be running out there, I think that offers a lot of versatility, and I'm very interested in it. And like personally, I think that Vassell is kind of like the move guy in the future in terms of like he's making like 30 million a year, and you can attach some assets to that and get like a real true blue like wing scorer. Because that's like to me that is what the team needs more than anything at this point. And I do love Vassell. I think he's great, and I would love for him to stick around. But yeah, Castle and Sohan are my guys. I'm very happy they're still on the roster. Yeah, it's that kind of like segues into my general draft ethos of like who can play defense. Like who do I think can play defense in June and in May, and that is probably who I would draft more often than not.
There you go. Yeah, I mean it's wild that we're able to keep all three of these core young prospects and their best picks. It seems and still land Fox at a time
Yeah,
like now.
keeping the Atlanta pick this year and then the swap in 26 and the unprotected in 27 was like that is the crown jewel of draft assets in San Antonio right now, and giving yourself that lottery shot and not using that 25 pick now at the deadline before you know what it's going to be, I think is awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility. The amount of options you have would stress me out for sure going into this summer. I would be like so anxious. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, we gotta do something. I'm excited to see how it all turns out.
For real, I mean, something's gonna happen. Even whether it's a pick, you just reload with more talent. Whether it's all a trade, I mean, you guys got options, and yeah, I could see how Vassell between the talent and the salary becomes a little more tradable in that sense. And yeah, I mean, on the Wembenyama thing, like I think he's shooting twice as many threes as Cat ever did in Minnesota.
That's
Like
crazy.
it's something nuts. Like
Yeah,
the
it was
amount of
almost as much
threes
as
he's
it was as
making.
much as Steph earlier this year, which I thought was wild. Where it's just like this is like
Yeah.
some of the things out of context don't make any sense, and like and you
Yeah,
watch
when
the
you
game, it's
just
like,
look at
oh
the stats, like the
yeah,
people that are like hating on a 7 footer doing it need to like go watch Kevin Durant or something. Like, are you mad at KD shooting threes? Like, if they're good at it, if it not just good at it, if they're dominating the NBA at it, like maybe just
yeah,
let him let him shoot from wherever
exactly. It's like
he
he's
needs
shooting
it
like
if he's
what is it
that
like?
good at it.
It's like mid 30s, like mid to high 30s now at this point on like an enormous
Yeah, it's
volume of
30.
attempts.
Right, 36% on 9 threes a game is where Wembanyama
That's
is, just a slight rounding up there, but, that it's just an insane. He's 10th overall in EPM, so the EPM rates him as the 10th most impactful player in the whole league, 3rd on defense alone, so top 3 on defense, top 10 overall, but via dunks and threes EPM. So, just to show how impactful he's been as an individual, and on that draft ethos, I thought we could shift over to your work with Swish Theory. You wrote an article called "A Beginner's Guide to Amateur Basketball," and thought that we could just kind of dive in real quick and hit on some of it. And it just goes to show anyone that's interested in the grassroots scene, and especially like if you're interested in draft scouting, NBA draft scouting, these players don't just drop in out of thin air every year. Like they're playing youth basketball up
mm,
until they play a year of college or a little bit of international pro ball. Or now there's other options like overtime elite or the NBA G League, just depending on your age and what you're qualified for. But these players don't just pop out of thin air. Like they are prospects that have grown up from kids to teenagers to college players, international pros, and this is a nice little guide for the younger side of the sport to kind of jump through all the events and different ways to catch talent. And what I think is important here is something I've been stressing on my own process is what I was just hitting on is just seeing the full pipeline of development talent, like being able to kind of see an NBA prospect play in different teams, different roles, different contexts, different expectations, and see how they handle all those different things. And then you get a lot bigger of a sample size of who they are as basketball prospects, what they're likely to be able to do as pros, what have they flashed skill wise that might translate versus what have they shown a lot of evidence of that will translate, trying to see the differences between, oh, he did this once one time versus I've seen him do this about 20 times over the course of his career. Like he's good at this, we don't really have to worry about it. And that's just an important piece of it. So where did this idea come from, and what interests you in this path of prospects to pros?
yes. I think that the idea for this came from was just like a general frustration of trying to get a handle on the like a high school and youth basketball scene itself, and that there's so many moving parts. Like you said, there's so many different like parts of it, and the further I got into draft. Uh, into like draft analysis and watching prospects, the more important it became. And like having, I found the sooner I had a like a strong grasp of like how it worked and what the context meant and how they kind of compared against each other was a huge part of kind of settling in like how to like actually value the inputs that you're getting from those things. And I mean, more than anything, for like the reason I wanted to make it was it's so hard to find tape if you don't have like a Synergy subscription where you can watch all these high school basketball teams. And uh, realizing that I could find tape on all 100 top RSCI guys on YouTube in like in high school and in EYBL was exciting. And like you really have to look for it though. Like it took me hours and hours and hours of scrolling through videos and being like grainy stuff. Like, wait, is that number 6 who I'm looking for? Like, oh crap, there it is. So like having to go through that, and I was like, well, that was really difficult, and I would like to be able to share that, and I had give people a resource to be able to just watch a couple of games if they didn't have it otherwise. But then beyond that, just understanding like how does the high school scene differ from the like AAU or EYBL and the general like the summer programs, and how does that compare to OTE, and how does that compare to the different avenues for development, and kind of trying to contextualize it was the most important thing. And it was a really fun project to make and something I was really proud to do. And I think it is helpful if you're trying to get a grasp on it. It was written like a year and change ago, so it was the landscape has changed a little bit. Some leagues have merged, but generally the ethos of the thing is the same. You kind of uh, the summer season before someone's senior year of high school is probably going to be uh, their biggest AAU scouting session in terms of like how you're going to project them forward. But I personally love high school basketball. Like I really enjoyed watching high school basketball during the year, and I get that people will value AAU stuff more just because they're playing a ton of games and there's more like kind of like NBA-ish talent on rosters. But I did think that I do think there's a lot of value in watching competitive high school teams play against each other, and I think they run a little more offense and play a little more like a functional teams. And I loved it. I really had a real joy in writing that, and it really helped me kind of further further establish what I valued in scouting, especially in going back a little bit further to kind of understand how people played. Um, yeah, again, like you can see the one here, like this, like the New Jersey Scholars game versus the New York Lightning. It's a blast to watch. Like I absolutely loved watching that game, and that was an EYBL one. But it was just being able to see guys like Elliot Cadeau and different play and like or like I loved watching DJ Wagner and kind of getting an idea of like how they succeeded against these levels and how that's going to change in college, and being able to compare that to like you get into their freshman season or like Isaiah Collier last year at USC. I loved him in high school. I thought he was the best guard in Georgia. Sorry, Stephon Castle. And he goes to USC and is like in a terrible context, and you're like, well, man, is he really this good? He's making a whole lot of like turnovers, and it doesn't feel like he's really generating offense. But if you're able to zoom out a little bit and see how he plays with the ball in his hands in a different context, it kind of like solidified my idea. Like, hey, Isaiah Collier is really good, and like he was the top rated recruit in his class, and that was for a reason because he like dominated games, and it's been cool to see that happen in Utah this year as well. So I'm a big believer in blue chip talent kind of finding a way more often than not. Though there are some that like you kind of have to like kind of cut out. Like Justin Edwards was one where I was like I didn't really like watching Justin Edwards very much in high school. I thought that it was a little bit difficult of a watch. I think that the shot selection was tough, and I didn't really buy the jumper as much. And then you see the struggles at Kentucky, and you're like, okay, no, this actually makes a lot of sense. And it's one of those where like maybe I'm not going to bet on the blue chip guy figuring it out here because the things that are struggling in high school were the same things you struggled at in college, and that was consistent. Versus like with Collier, like there was a little looseness, but it wasn't it didn't feel like it was in the same ethos of struggle. So I think that yeah, in general, I loved watching youth basketball, and I I I miss being able to watch as much as I did back in that summer.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about blue chip talent where like I think there's something to be said that like if someone has reached a consensus wide like talent ranking that a lot of people can see it and you don't see it, but he's highly ranked for a reason and he stays that way throughout the process, like it's okay to like sometimes there's things we don't understand as evaluators, but I think it has to do with that context that you mentioned. Like if you're noticing reasons why the success isn't working, then maybe everyone is kind of falling into consensus groupthink instead of like looking at the player that's standing right in front of them and projecting a lot of what they think could happen instead of seeing what is happening versus so in the context of NBA team building, like you said, I think if they at any point in the process they have shown to be a blue chip talent where they're highly rated, highly touted, then amongst their peers they are that. But
Yeah,
I think it can be worth a swing in the draft, and especially later in the draft where there's a little less risk involved, and then also on ancillary pieces maybe that where a guy doesn't fit in one place in the NBA. That doesn't mean he's a bad player. It might just be a bad fit. Not every player is going to be LeBron James where it just fits anywhere. Like sometimes it takes the right role, the right buy-in from both sides, and for everything to work out. So I think in terms of collecting talent, that is a good way to go. But like you mentioned as well, like being able to look at that talent for what it is and not try to ask it to do too much, where expectations can really kill just kind of how everyone measures up, and it can like ruin a player's like production if the expectations are viewed the wrong way, or someone is asked to do too much, then someone will be viewed as a disappointment when really they've always been this player. So, trying to have in mind those strengths and weaknesses beforehand can be huge for everyone's sake. So, on the
Exactly.
draft itself, you have these thoughts on the draft. We have an upcoming class where the Spurs can get back into it. Where are you leaning? Where are you hoping the Spurs might go towards in terms of a prospect type of prospect, or do you hope they keep the pick, trade the pick? What are you hoping for?
So I am personally hoping they kind of keep the picks. I love drafting. I love adding a young talent. It's just I'm always going to default to that. And I guess there's one further point here. When I first started draft scouting, I think one of like the things I believed the most was like how many inputs can I get in? Be that as tape, be that as people's opinion, be that as just kind of like thinking about it myself and like statistical inputs. Like how can I add as much as I can to create a more comprehensive picture of what I'm doing? And when I first started doing it and didn't have much access to high school stuff and didn't have as much understanding of high school basketball, the my default was like, okay, who do I trust as an evaluator, and like how can I like take their opinions of someone's and then project that to what they're doing in college now, and can I compare these back and forth? And being able to develop those for myself was great, but I also like really do value the opinions of people that are actually experts in the field of what it is. And I think that more often than not, there's a lot of people that are very highly invested that will have strong opinions. And I am not the biggest fan of taking negative opinions of people on prospects. I don't care to hear them very often, just because I think that everyone kind of has their own like biases against or for certain play types and play styles. But if somebody really loves a prospect, like Roe and Ahmed at Swish really love Colin Murray Boyles, and it in the last year I was like, hey, like getting into in the beginning of the year, I was like, I don't like know if I super see this. I watched him in high school and I thought he was like an interesting piece, but I wasn't sure if I bought it. But like respecting their knowledge of the sport and of scouting and their opinions on things, like digging into that more and kind of understanding where that love came from, gave me a lot more of an understanding of his value as a prospect. And I think that is something that is super helpful to kind of compare against of high school. And like you're not going to get everything you need from a high school scout or a youth basketball scout, but it will being able to compare it to their future performance and how they're viewed kind of like on a national stage, I think goes a long way in terms of like properly valuing the player itself. Hold on, I lost my big board here one second.
Yeah, and
And
on that point, I think it's really important to kind of like the best way, in my opinion, to remove your own biases is to account for what you just said. Like to be open to talking to people with who are very high on prospects where you just don't see it, and
exactly,
to better understand, why someone's so high on them. So at the very least, what a realistic outcome could be if you're wrong and they're right, and
exactly.
you
And
know
the range of outcomes of every prospect is enormous, and is entirely dependent on the context that they're placed into in the NBA. Like if they go to a team that is not built for them to succeed, or is going to put them in a role where they're not well suited, like they're going to fail. Like that, they're 20-year-olds or 19-year-olds. They're not. These aren't like enormously resilient professionals that have just found a way to make it in the world. Like it is very difficult to grow into your own as a professional basketball player. And so the actual like quality of a prospect is not indicative of their actual results as an NBA player, especially earlier in their career. And like you said, like that understanding that it's going to be different on every stage, and that while somebody may really love a prospect because of what they could be, like they maybe in your mind's eye that is not how you would prefer to build a team, and that is maybe where the difference comes from. Or maybe it's just like, oh, I kind of miss this the translatability of the skill to multiple contexts, and so it's kind of understanding where that comes from. At least in terms of this upcoming class, it's a really nice class. I really like it. Um, it would be awesome to get Cooper Flag. I mean, that would be great. That would be super cool.
Why not? Just throw them on
Dylan
there.
Harper feels a little bit less exciting than maybe like 3 weeks ago. But I would very much prefer to keep the picks. I think that as we get a little bit closer to draft season, you'll have more of an idea of like who is going to be around in that like 8 to 12 range. Right now, it feels like every updated mock from ESPN or from Bleacher Report, it has teams valuing guys all over the place now in that range. Um, but I think that it is a very strong draft, and I think that when you're sitting in that kind of like hotspot of the middle end of the lottery, you get a lot of the talented players that maybe have a little more particular of a team fit, and or maybe a more particular of an evaluation that are not going to be as good of a fit in certain places, and being able to jump on talent when it's there is kind of my general ethos of stuff. And so I like Ace Bailey more than most of my colleagues at Swish. I think that there's a lot to like there, and I think he'd be a really fun fit in San Antonio as like a scoring wing and somebody who can kind of play off of Vic. But again, that is one where it's like, oh, he's probably going to go 3, even though like I think that his overall value is probably more closer to the middle of the lottery in that respect. But going into I think that the most interesting thing is that you have this foundation of talent between Wembanyama and Fox, and you have Vassell and Sohan uh, and Castle and Keldon, all these guys that kind of fill in, but nobody that is really like anchored down any of those 2 through 4 spots. And so like, anywhere off the wing is going to be a really fun fit. Like I think Gaspar Sakashonis is a really fun fit next to Fox and those guys, and that his shooting is really 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 great and adds some like much needed playmaking throughout the roster as well. I do think the value of playmaking and passing is underrated for guys that you don't think are going to be like a primary guy. And I don't think that Yakushonis is going to maybe be like your lead initiator on an offense and like your lead guard. I think that there's a chance that could be, but you're probably not like putting him in a pick and roll 100 times a game. But his feel for the game and his ability to shoot off of different actions and be able to like get into his jumper like in an instant, off of the dribble is really valuable. And I think that is a skill that I would super like. And like again, he's like locked into like kind of like the 6-ish to 7 or 4 range. So like who knows if he's there at the end of the lottery? But that would probably be my favorite overall fit. But beyond that, I would love VJ Edgecombe as well. Again, Baylor bias, can't help it. It'd be a super fun fit though. I mean, though, like I do buy the jumper, but it's maybe more of a project than people would like. But I just it'll be there's a lot of fun options here. Do you have anybody in particular that sticks out in your mind's eye? It'd be a fun fit in San Antonio.
Yeah, it's funny. Before the season, over the summer with Ben Pfeiffer, I'd also VJ Edgecombe was the first prospect I mentioned when we were talking about the Spurs, and he was probably a little higher projected back then.
Hmm.
But I really just like the idea of his downhill explosiveness off of Wemby, almost in the way that they have kind of brought Fox in to do a similar like
Hmm.
change of pace, dynamic driver off of Wemby's pick and pop ability. So that was someone I thought could like it's worth taking some high potential swings now that you have Wemby. Like
Hmm.
I guess you could talk me into like you can't go wrong with whether you're looking for good basketball players who are like safe bets to be good versus let's just take more high potential swings, which might be a little riskier, but we have Wemby, so none of these guys are going to be overtasked with a burden to have to do too much. So, Kasparis is a great nod. He fits really well because he can run some offense, he can run some pick and roll, but it doesn't have to be the entire offense in San Antonio. You have that step back jumper that could be useful in a pick and roll, pick and pop alongside Wemby's popping or rolling, and a little bit of a scoring outlet next to Fox. And you have all these other defenders with Sohan and Castle already there. So, I definitely could see how he slides right in and feels kind of an offensive firepower need. That's a good nod. And yeah, I mean, Edgecombe's explosiveness is really nice there. If you want to go maybe a safer pick, Asa Newell is a
Hmm.
really just smart defender, smart team player, and I think he's going to help basically any team, but he could
I
be there
agree.
in that range where like he brings little defensive versatility, little offensive rebounding, crashing the glass, projects to look like he can hit that pick and pop, catch and shoot 3-pointer himself. But the selling point for Newell to me is that defensive versatility and just a handful, just enough ball skills to make me enticed. Where like you can get like he's not starting with the ball with doing an ISO and just running
Yeah.
the entire offense. See, that's not his game. But he's a plug and play guy to me that's going to defend the front court well, going to protect the rim, going to rebound, going to crash the glass really well, offensive glass. Talking about the offensive rebounding, and then can hit the open three, can hit some post up counter moves. Like he's a good player. And yeah, I mean, I think with Fox and Wemby in the fold, and then a handful of other prospects that are good basketball players. Like you could really go a lot of different ways, but
Yeah.
overall, I think taking a wing like you suggested trying to find a little bit of a scoring, shooting valve on the wing outside of those guys that can hold their own defensively, I think is probably the goal with that pick long term.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the San Antonio front office has kind of chosen pretty consistently to value positional size and like relative athleticism and like defensive competence in their draft picks, and so that's why I like the idea of a Con or a Liam McNeely, but I do wonder if they would be excited about like spending their like prime draft picks on a somebody that's not going to be much of a plus on defense, especially in terms of McNeely. I don't really like the defense at all.
Mm.
Um, but I do obviously like the fit, but I do wonder if that is something that's more that this front office views as more replaceable in like free agency or like kind of in a bargain bin deal. Like Julian Champagny is on the team and he's like shooting like 36, 37% from three, and like he could be a little bit better. He's not the level of shooter of those guys, but is a very good defender and fits in really well pretty much any lineup we're gonna run out there. So like I like is a couple of like lesser known guys that I would actually like in that kind of like later lottery range of like I like Miles Bird a lot. I think that he is a really fun wing and kind of defensive playmaker and guy who can space the floor, and his general weakness of like he's really skinny and doesn't finish well around the rim. Again, when you have a spacing five, like oh no, like Rudy Gobert is standing out at the top of the key because he has to face guard Wemby because who knows he's going to shoot from 36 feet. So I think that makes it a lot easier. Like Rasheer Fleming is another guy I really love in terms of just being able to kind of maximize the lineups that he's in. And like obviously, I would you got two picks here, and so I think that they will probably have a combination of like taking a swing on somebody that they think could really be a true blue like star maybe one day, and then trying to find some type of like plug and play kind of fit of someone. And I think that Bird and Fleming really are the two guys that stick out to me in terms of like pretty easy to plug in, should space the floor well and make the guys around them better, but also still be like playoff caliber defenders. Um,
Yeah, I really like Miles Bird too. Good
he's
shout
good.
there.
He's really good.
From what I've seen, like he's like he can step out and be a good basketball player pretty quick for any team, and he brings a lot of what you're talking about between like the pull up shot, the defense, handle, the passing, like just can plug and play in a good on a good team there. So that's a good shout.
Yeah, I think that I mean I also I love like as a final parting thing. I if they drafted Common Malawak in the lottery, I would lose
Oh
my
man.
mind. I would absolutely go bananas. I would be so excited. Like that would be so much fun. I think he's incredible. I think he's the best lob finisher I've ever seen.
Whew,
It's like unbelievable. Just like some of the
man.
catches he makes and the balls he can get to, and just like literally leaping over people and like being like bent over someone and just yamming. It's just unbelievable.
Whew, man,
And
that would be a big team right
it
there. I
would
don't
be
know.
incredible, and and really we don't have a backup five, so like we desperately need like an actual five, and I wonder if they would probably prefer to do that on the free agent market rather than as a rookie.
Mm.
But Malawak would be he's probably my favorite prospect compared to like overall value of like the mainstream in the class. I think he's so good, and especially with a real point guard in Fox, I would be much more interested in that. But yeah, that would be my pie in the sky dream of like let's just throw out as many 7-footers as we can. Play Sohan at
Man,
the three, dude. Like let's go, let's do
why
it.
why not? We're going all sides here in San Antonio. I
Yeah,
mean, Mayuak and Wemby is just unfair type of height advantage, let alone everything else. But that'd be one of the cleanest like rim rollers paired with pick and poppers
yeah,
that you could find, and just imagining all the two screen actions that you run with Fox
yeah,
turning the corner around that. I mean that's how we end it right there with
yeah.
the pipe dream draft
Oh
pick
man,
for the
that is
Spurs
the
fans.
dream. I'm
Why
gonna think
not?
about that all day.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he slips. Maybe the Spurs move up. You got just a possibility here. You
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Fingers crossed. He's a little bit of a divisive prospect. Hasn't played like a ton of basketball in his life, so like I think his overall draft value is going to be a little more volatile. But I would love it, and that would make me really excited. And the idea of him being in the dunker spot or him
Whew,
playing in the pick and roll and Wimby spacing out to like literally like what to like the parking lot. He's like, all right, well, let's see what happens.
man,
That'd be a blast.
lethal pairing. And yeah, I mean, he could really go anywhere in the lottery at this point. The Swish Theory Big Board team has him like third, I want to say,
Yeah, that's where I
among
have him.
the
Yeah,
aggregate. There you go. So like super high on him here at the site. But yeah, I mean, he's projected kind of all over the lottery, so who really knows where he'll end up? But I think as a one of the best bigs in the class, like relatively safer with the rim rolling, and I like his instincts on both ends, like big size, like that should get him. I feel like picked pretty high, but like you said, kind of been a little volatile and had a late path to playing, so you never really know. But we'll see how these mock drafts
yeah.
lay out. Maybe he'll be in San Antonio soon. But I appreciate you taking the time to talk some Spurs today, Tyler. It was a lot of fun diving into some hoops.
I appreciate it. It was a blast. We'll have to catch up again in the summer ahead of the draft and see where we're at. This is a fun time.
I like it, no doubt. Well, you have a good one, and appreciate
Peace.
you taking the time, man.
You too. Peace.
Edit.
With Ryan.